I am very, very tired. I took my older daughter to the pool the other day for a swimming class, and there's like a part of the class where she goes and swims with the teacher, and I just stand there, and I was leaning against the side of the wall, and I realized that I was on the verge of falling asleep, just standing in the pool. And so they would have all just seen me just kerplunk into the water. So, but I've had a lot of coffee, and I'm not going to fall asleep like that. I hope. I'm going to read part of a long story that was in Zyzzyva in the winter of 2012. It's about a guy who buys a sawmill and gets drunk and cheats on his wife. And I'm going to read from the middle, and this part is a flashback that happens while he's blacked out. And my father's here, so I'm just going to throw out there and say this is not autobiographical. Mostly not autobiographical. On his 19th birthday, Milk Dalbo changed his name and packed his bags and moved out of his parents' house forever. He'd been home from college for only a week before he realized he needed something new. So he borrowed money from his father, bought a truck, and moved down the shore for the summer. He found a job in a sawmill at the edge of the pine barrens. Soon he had an apartment 5 blocks from the beach. He worked hard all day and slept well at night, exhausted by his labors and lulled by the sound of the ocean pounding away at the world, trying to get at him. His mother's maiden name was Miller. Her people had come from the pines. Miller told himself that milling was in his blood. The mill was maybe 10 miles east of Batstow, where the Pineys had smelted bog iron for Washington's army and built mansions now moldering deep in the trees. The area was all sand and poison ivy, pines and cedars and stunted oaks. On the day Miller went asking for a job, he drove halfway to the mill and then suddenly pulled off the road to listen to the trees hushing the wind. He opened his door and stepped down to take a piss, put one foot in the high grass, and sent a handful of grasshoppers scattering. He'd had nervous cramps since breakfast. He'd taken his first ever shot of morning whiskey to stop his hands from shaking. He had no real work experience. He was wearing an overly clean pair of jeans, a tucked-in flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and new caterpillar boots that he'd scuffed up with a wire brush the night before. He dribbled urine on the toe of his boot and swore at himself, his voice loud in the empty woods. He kicked his boot through the grass and shouted. The bugs jumped all over. He felt magnificent. The sawmill itself was just off the main road through that part of the forest. Miller had been to the mill once as a child with a friend whose father had been adding a deck to his beach house. The boys had been ordered to wait in the truck where it was safe, while the father haggled. Returning almost 10 years later, Miller found that nothing was exactly as he remembered, and yet everything was just as it should be. The clay and gravel driveway was crisscrossed with tire tracks and stamped everywhere with boot prints. Stacks of lumber sat under heavy tarps along the cutting shed, next to a forklift so filthy that it looked as if it had once been set on fire. Behind the shed sat an office, a low building with a screen door, tar-papered walls, and one dark and dusty window propped open by a box fan. Miller started walking past the shed toward the office. He heard the sputter and roar of a motor, the whine of a saw, and the shouting of men. He was careful to step where the gravel was thickest, but his boots sank past their soles. The whining stopped and there was yelling. A man standing at the mouth of the shed was waving. With his other hand, he was holding a cigar as thick as a corncob. Miller introduced himself. The man's name was Moses Gaskell. He was the foreman. Moses hired Miller on the spot because he liked the name Miller and thought it would be funny. He said so. Everyone would call him Miller the Miller. Miller for short. And this was what Miller liked about working in the sawmill. He liked that near the front end of the shed, near its gaping mouth, sat a pile of uncut logs of all diameters. Miller liked to imagine the crushing weight of the pile, its awesome gravity. He liked that the logs had their branches stripped, but the bark left on, that the trunks were spotted with fat white circles where the limbs had been amputated. He liked that behind the log pile, Rusty Crane squatted in the tall weeds, its ballast end half into the woods, its exhaust pipe black with soot, its windshield speckled with yellow clay. He liked the belch of its muffler. He liked that the moment he saw the log saddle dangling half undone from the crane's lowered arm, he recognized it for what it was. He liked that they kept the camp hooks standing teeth down in the driveway, leaning together to hold each other up like the core of a bonfire. He liked that every day he parked his truck at the end of a line of trucks, and he liked that they were all pocked with dents and rusted out, and that his was collecting more of the same pits and dents every day. He liked the sails of yellow mud behind his wheel wells. He liked that everyone had a nickname. Freddie Fuckface Funny, Davy Jones Jones, Jerking Jack J.J. Johnson. He liked that the Pineys seemed to like alliteration. He liked being Miller Miller. He liked that his shirts developed spreading yellow stains. He liked that he stunk. He liked having sunburn on his arms and neck while never, ever, ever going to the beach. It seemed like honest sunburn. He liked that the work required gloves and goggles, and he liked that when he showed up on the first day unprepared, they let him work without them. He liked the saw, its impracticability, its brute success. He liked that it ran off a clutchless Buick diesel engine, the trestle rigged to the same mechanism as the blade. He liked that sawmills were no longer made that way. He liked that sometimes the blade was slow and moan, that it was shiny and black with burnt sap, that it coughed a constant flare of yellow chips and flakes. He liked that the air was choked with rich, wet dust, that it stuck to his goggles and hindered his vision. He liked how they followed the piece through its pass, how sometimes the dogs wouldn't hold it. And he liked the yellow caution line painted a foot from the trestle, and he liked that when the owner was away, they all ignored it. He liked that the owner was rarely there. But Miller liked the owner. One day, midsummer, the owner stepped into the shed and pulled Miller aside for a chat. The man wore an ivory button-down shirt and a red silk tie, polished wingtips, and a clean pair of gray slacks. Miller liked that he looked like an owner of things. His name was Lawrence Luker. Mr. Luker's skin and shoes were furred with a thin film of moist sawdust like iron filings. He and Miller climbed the steps to the observation platform, where Miller had never stood. And they stopped beside a large red button marked Kill Switch. Miller liked the name, and that he had known the switch was there, and that it was practically inaccessible. Thank you.